We've been told for years to keep our minds open, like some intellectual golden rule. But what if that advice is quietly ruining your sleep, sowing stress, and turning your attention into a juggler with too many balls? Stay with me as we argue you're actually better off closing your mind. Hello, my name is Gene. I'm building a club to help people navigate our AI cultural revolution. It is Guildrim. We will master the new AI tools, support people displaced by the machine, and lead them into the cybernetic future. Our topic today is why you should feel okay closing your mind. Let's begin. Years back, I tried to keep every notion open, like a collector of stray thoughts. I ended up with a headache, half a dozen unfinished projects, and the unsettling realization that more knowledge doesn't always mean more clarity. Somewhere in the avalanche of distraction, I'd forgotten how to focus. Modern culture equates open-mindedness with virtue, but psychology warns that too much input can overwhelm our brain's processing capacity. That state of overwhelm leads to fatigue and reduced clarity of thought. The sheer volume of bytes hitting us through social media, notifications, and constant news pushes our attention beyond limits that were once manageable, sparking stress instead of enlightenment. That flood of data doesn't just tire attention. It chips away at the quality of your thinking in ways that are subtle at first and then unmistakable. What begins as mild distraction slowly becomes friction in every choice you try to make. Research shows that when our cognitive load exceeds capacity, choices become harder and decisions feel paralyzing. The brain, overwhelmed by inputs, starts to default to shortcuts or avoidance. Instead of clarity, you get hesitation. Instead of conviction, you get second guessing. Even small decisions begin to feel strangely heavy, as though every option carries the weight of 100 half processed headlines behind it. Culture today celebrates endless feeds and constant updates, but there's a price. Anxiety rises as people try to absorb an unending stream of bits, images, and hot takes. Worse, social media environments often intensify the strain by layering social pressure on top of information glut. It isn't only that you're absorbing more content than you can process, you're also comparing, reacting, signaling, and quietly measuring yourself against everyone else's highlight reel. That combination pushes users toward emotional exhaustion. The mind isn't built to perform for an audience while simultaneously trying to understand the entire world. Ever heard of choice overload? It's a cognitive reality where too many options don't expand freedom but quietly smother it. When possibilities multiply beyond what the mind can comfortably compare, evaluation turns into strain. Instead of feeling empowered, you feel stalled. The abundance that was supposed to liberate you starts to blur distinctions. Decisions drag, confidence shrinks. You stand in front of infinite options and somehow end up choosing nothing at all. Think social circles on apps help your mind expand? That's the promise. More perspectives, more conversations, more stimulation, but sometimes they just slice your attention into thinner and thinner strips. Each thread demands a reply, each post a reaction, each debate a position. Your focus gets divided into fragments, so small they barely hold shape. You end up razor sharp nowhere, skimming everything and mastering nothing. Studies link constant exposure to information with spikes in anxiety and stress as the brain fights to make sense of noise it never asked for. Doom scrolling, that compulsive habit of scrolling through negative news, can fuel stress and disturb sleep, showing how excess information can literally disrupt rest. Even when you try to be discerning, the sheer pace of content can erode your ability to evaluate any of it well. You start with good intentions, determined to sift carefully and think deeply. But the stream keeps moving. Another headline appears before you finish processing the first. Another argument demands attention before you've weighed the last. Insight, which requires stillness and patience, begins to dissolve. What might have become understanding, instead, turns into a blur of half-formed impressions. That's because your brain has limits. When it's overwhelmed with input, attention narrows and memory falters. not unlike trying to hold too much water in a sieve. The open-minded ideal quietly assumes you possess endless bandwidth, as if your attention were some celestial server farm humming without limit. In reality, human cognition is tightly bounded. It tires, it filters, it prioritizes. When that boundary is breached, clarity doesn't expand, it fractures. You end up trading depth for diffusion and insight for static. In trying to hold everything, you actually retain less than you would by choosing carefully. Social media can be useful. Sure, it can connect friends across continents and surface ideas you might never have encountered otherwise. But excessive use links to stress and disrupted moods, partly because the brain works overtime just keeping up. Each scroll demands a tiny act of evaluation, comparison, reaction. Multiply that by hundreds, and your nervous system ends the day feeling like it ran a marathon in place. When information arrives faster than you can evaluate it, your internal filter gets jammed, leading to tension and reduced capacity to recognize what is genuinely meaningful. In that environment, keeping your mind open stops being a posture of curiosity and starts functioning like an unlocked door in a crowded street. Every passing thought walks in, every trend demands a hearing. Instead of expanding your understanding, the habit makes you porous to noise. You end up absorbing trivia instead of insights, collecting fragments of information that glitter briefly and then evaporate before they can deepen into anything meaningful. The mind doesn't grow by receiving every last detail. Often it grows by rejecting what's irrelevant so it can refine what's truly worth attending to. Cognitive economy matters. When people close channels they don't need, like endless feeds or compulsive news checks, they report greater clarity and less stress, something psychologists are only just beginning to take seriously. Beyond that, curated intake protects psychic energy. Attention is not an endless resource, it is more like a budget, and reckless spending leaves you bankrupt by evening. When you choose carefully what enters your mind, you preserve strength for what actually deserves it. Instead of scattering yourself across trivial updates and passing controversies, you can invest attention where it does most good, where it compounds into understanding rather than dissolving into noise. Culture tells you to stay open as if it were a moral commandment, as though intellectual virtue requires you to hold every door ajar at all times. The slogan sounds noble, almost saintly, yet that steady posture of openness can turn your inner life into a public square where every passerby is invited to shout. In the process, peace of mind is quietly traded away for noise, and chaos starts masquerading as sophistication. Paradoxically, by closing doors and ignoring curated streams, you sharpen your ability to notice the ones that matter when they appear. Imagine filtering news to essentials. Suddenly, your internal world doesn't feel like a crowded market square, but a focused study where deep thought can actually occur. Plenty of thinkers throughout history have valued solitude over perpetual sensory input, understanding that insight tends to arrive when the noise recedes and the mind can finally stretch out. They stepped away from the crowd, not because they despised it, but because they knew that clarity prefers quiet rooms. Our age repeats their words about reflection and depth, then proceeds to strap a notification bell to every waking hour and call it enlightenment. It's not ignorance to close your mind. It's discipline. It lets you sample fewer signals but understand them better. Your mind, like any tool, needs limits. Without them, you lose strength to simple exhaustion from too much digital noise. The anxious swirl of online culture feeds a belief that missing even one update is ruinous. By curating your sources, you stop feeding that beast. You reclaim your internal life by choosing what enters it rather than letting every ping and post shove its way in like an uninvited guest. Closing your mind to endless external noise doesn't make you closed off, it makes you discriminating, letting you choose what deserves your finite attention. Ironically, it's in the act of saying no to irrelevant input that you can finally say yes to real discovery, depth, and creative focus. So go ahead and close your mind to the endless flood of trivia and noise. Give yourself permission to ignore the headlines that change every 6 minutes and the opinions that multiply like rabbits on caffeine. You'll feel lighter, less distracted, and strangely calmer. And in that quiet, you'll finally be poised to notice what actually matters in your world, instead of drowning in everything that doesn't. But before we leave, be sure to like the video, comment below, and subscribe to the channel, where we help creatives build community in the age of AI. And until next time, remember, a grand world awaits.